So I was at the Tri-State Comic Convention yesterday, or Tri-Con, and I bought 4 pounds of 90s comics. Often at comic stores you used to see these things called quarter bins. Today they're typically called dollar bins, where it's just old inventory they can't get rid of. And this dealer was selling comics by the pound. They had a scale set up like you were at the grocery store, and all the weird stuff they couldn't sell, they were literally giving away for $1 by the pound. So let's see what $4 worth of 90s comics will get you. First up here, you got Wildstar, which was created by Al Gordon and Jerry Ordway. As you can see, it's got some shiny foil ink on the cover. Gordon and Ordway, these were older guys kind of trying to get in on the Image bandwagon, and it's got more of a polished look than a lot of those, early Image comics. A lot of those old ones, it's just guys standing around and looking cool, but this one is still very much, it's your quintessential early Image comic. There's a plot involving symbiotes and time travel, and Wildstar rips a dude's face off, and it is what it is. Okay, next up we got Darkhawk Annual number 2. In 1993, Marvel had this gimmick where every annual was going to introduce a new character, and that character was going to get its own trading card. About the only character that anyone really remembers from that year, of the annuals, was Guinnessville, who later became the star of Peter David's Captain Marvel series. Anyway, this one is Dream Killer, and his trading card's right here. Okay, third book. This is Bloodstrike. Bloodstrike was a spin-off of Rob Liefeld's Youngblood. He designed the characters, in case you couldn't tell by the presence of not really Cable and not really Wolverine here on the cover. And the thing that's notable about this is the cover had this gimmick where there was this special ink that would respond to touch, and the blood on the cover would disappear if you rubbed it and got it warm for a little while. But unfortunately, this cover was not meant to last 20 years, and now all of them, they no longer respond to being touched, and they're all this sort of washed out pinkish color. Okay, we got the Brotherhood. This is maybe the only non-90s comic I found in there. This is a spin-off of the X-Men. It came out right around the time the first X-Men movie came out, and this comic is infamous, one, for being a story about the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but not with Magneto or Mystique or any characters you ever heard of, and two, because the writer had his or her name taken off of it. When you read the credits in the first issue, it just says Writer X, and no one knows who actually wrote this comic. A lot of people think it's either Howard Mackey or Devin Grayson, but we'll never know. Okay, we got Midnight Suns Darkhold, a.k.a. Darkhold Redeemers, a.k.a. Darkhold, The Book of Sins. This was a spin-off of Ghost Rider. Basically, they had this storyline called Rise of the Midnight Suns, and they gave Ghost Rider his own massive team that, strangely enough, never got their own ongoing series. But the Darkhold Redeemers were these people who were trying to find the Book of Darkhold, which is this basically a cursed monkey's paw. And every issue, this demon called the Dwarf would go around handing people pages of the book. They would make wishes on it, and they would be cursed and turn into a monster that the Darkhold Redeemers would have to fight. Illuminator. This is published by Marvel. I'm guessing it's early to mid-90s, and this one I have no idea what it is. Trencher. So after Keith Giffen left DC Comics, Lobo had just become this really hot character, and he basically went around creating characters that were just like Lobo. He created a character for Marvel Comics called Lunatic, that was basically Lobo with a space pixie. And for Image, he created a character called Trencher, who is basically Lobo. This book is kind of famous because it was one of the first books Image Comics ever canceled. Keith Giffen took the character to a new publisher called Black Ball, but that never really got off the ground. Anyway, on the back of this cover, there is an ad with Trencher himself shilling Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and considering Understanding Comics is now viewed this classic that's still used in English classes today, I find it kind of funny he is shilling it. Okay, we got Razorline. This is a preview book for Clive Barker's Razorline comics. Basically, this was just a bunch of characters and concepts that Clive Barker created, but he never actually wrote. The most famous of these is probably Saint Sinner, because that one inspired a TV movie on the Sci-Fi Channel. So that's probably one of the most obscure comic characters to ever get a movie. Exiles. Okay, Malibu Comics had this very popular for a short time superhero universe called the Ultraverse. Marvel bought them, but didn't really know what to do with any of the properties, and now all the characters are in legal limbo. Anyway, this is Exiles, unrelated to the Marvel comic of the same name, and it's kind of infamous because there was a swerve about 6 issues in where they just killed the whole team, and that was the end. Hokum and Hex. Okay, this is another book from Clive Barker's Razorline Comics. It's about a stand-up comedian that gets magic powers and has to fight this, like, doomsday cult, and there's no character actually named Hokum or Hex in it. It's kind of weird. Alright. Nomad. So Nomad was the second Bucky in the Captain America comics. He got Steve Rogers' costume when Steve briefly became Nomad in the Man Without a Country spinoff, and then for a little while in the 90s, he was Lorenzo Lamas from Renegade. He basically ran around on a motorcycle, and I believe for a while in this series, he was taking care of a toddler. So it was Lone Wolf and Cub meets Lorenzo Lamas as Renegade. More Nomad. Oh boy. Let's see what we got here. A third issue of Nomad featuring ex-Bucky versus ex-Captain America. So yeah, here he is fighting U.S. Agent. A fourth straight issue of Nomad. This is a story called Dead Man's Hand, and as you can see, Deadpool guest starred in it. Alright, this is Night Stalkers, another book from the Rise of the Midnight Suns line. Night Stalkers was basically this attempt at reintroducing all these characters from the Tomb of Dracula comic from the 70s into the 90s, and they were this monster hunting team. Why this book is significantly important is that this reintroduced Blade and would be the inspiration for the Wesley Snipes film. Another Night Stalkers comic, introducing Hydra's Deadly Task Force, DOA. Okay. Alright, this is another Marvel 1993 annual. It has a new character trading card inside, but it's kind of hidden, so I don't know who they introduced. It does say, featuring the return of Marvel's most unnatural hero. So I'm guessing, a thing is, in the 90s, when, like, characters' copyright would show up, they would say, the superhero you never thought would return. And it'd be, like, Man-Thing or some weird forgotten 70s character. Alright. Wild Thing. The Daughter of Wolverine. This is from Marvel's MC2 comic line, the same comic imprint that gave us Spider-Girl. This is a character that never made much sense to me because she is the daughter of Wolverine and Elektra, but she has Psylocke's powers for reasons I don't understand. Ultraman! Virgin Comics cover edition, and No, this was not published by the comics imprint of Virgin Media. There was an Ultraman TV series in the early 90s. I think it only went like a dozen episodes, so maybe this was based on that little weird Americanized show. Daydreamers! Okay, this is a team book featuring Howard the Duck, Leech and Artie from the X-Men / New Mutants / well, they were supporting characters that never actually functioned on a team. Franklin Richards and Man-Thing. I think maybe at this point they were drawing characters out of a hat. The Strangers! Okay, this is another book from Malibu's Ultra Comics line. What's kind of interesting is these were literally strangers on, I think it was either a subway or a trolley car in San Francisco that got hit by a burst of energy and all got superpowers. And some of them decided to become heroes, some became villains, and a bunch of them just decided, hey, let's form a superhero team. Sorry, Ultra Hero Team. That's what they called them in the Ultraverse. All right, another 1993 Punisher Marvel Annual featuring a new character, Eradication. And the character in this, you can see the trading card back here, is Eradicator 6, and I believe this is just a story about the Punisher fighting a robot, which, hey, I'm on board for that. Death Wish! Okay, this is a Milestone comic. Milestone comics are awesome. It was basically an attempt by DC to create a whole line of superheroes where white wasn't the default color, so there were a lot of black characters, some Asian, Hispanic characters, some very early attempts at gay superheroes in this line. Anyway, Death Wish was a villain from Hardwire, which was sort of their attempt at an Iron Man-esque character. It was an excellent book. And anyway, Death Wish existed in that book as sort of a deconstruction of the gun-wielding vigilante archetype, like the Punisher. And basically, the plot twist in that was that he was every bit the monster that he was hunting for, and just dangerously unhinged. So, because this is the 90s, they decided to make him the protagonist of his own miniseries, and I think this one is notable for having a sympathetic trans character, which should be super groundbreaking for 1992, 1993, 1994, around the time this was published. And finally, Team X 2000! This is a Marvel book that I know almost nothing about. Bishop and Deathbird lead the revolution against the Shi'ar Empire. Note that Cable and Falcon are two characters on the cover who I believe have a lot more standing than Deathbird, so a little interesting they would choose to market that. I want to say this came out around 1998, 1999, when you could still use the word 2000 and have it sound all futuristic. And that is 4 pounds of 90s comics.